Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at basic usage of asynchronous tasks in Android. So I left the last application in such a state that if you touch 4 points on the image, it then invokes some code that tries to store those points in the database. And storing things in a database can potentially take a little bit of time. And for that reason, what I'd really like to do is I'd like to have some kind of dialog box that comes up and says saving points or something like that. And would then save the points, and then the dialog will go away automatically. Now, a naive implementation of that would look like this one here. So we're saying here, create a dialog. I've got this string that I've got in the strings XML that just says something like storing data. So I'm just setting the message. I have no title and no buttons on this dialog, which is what I want. And I'm showing the dialog, I'm storing the points, and I'm dismissing it. But in fact, what happens if we run this code is that we never see the dialog. And the reason for that is that to show a dialog, it's no good just calling show. You've got to call show and then let the GUI system, the thread that's running the user interface, process the dialog, and then you've got to do your stuff. And then later on, the thread's got to dismiss the dialog. So if you just call show and dismiss in the same method, you're not going to see any dialog because nothing's happening in between here. You need some stuff to happen here in between that actually makes the dialog display. Now, to sort that out, what we need to do is we need to run the storing of points here in a asynchronous task. In other words, we need to make it run in a task, a thread, that's separate to the main thread and parallel to it. So in this method we can just show the dialog and then kick off some sort of asynchronous task, and the task will then store the data in the database, and when it's finished it will then dismiss the dialog itself. And to make that work, we're going to use a class called async task. Now, this is a ferocious looking parameterized class, and the parameters let you pass parameters into your task. They let your task post values to indicate progress, which you can receive in a method that will update the GUI, and you can get a result from your task as well. But in this tutorial I don't want to use any of those, so for each of these template parameters I'm going to specify void, and it has to be void with a capital V, because void with a lowercase v will be a primitive type, and you can't use a primitive type in a parameter list for a generic parameterized class like this. So the bottom line is just put void for your parameters, your parameter types. And I'm going to declare a variable here called task and set it equal to a new async task, and I'll have the same parameter types here. Java 7 allows you to miss out the second recitation of your parametric types, but I'm using Java 6, so they have to be repeated here. And then I have two round kind of constructor type brackets, and if I were to type this, that would look as though I'm just declaring an object of a particular class and setting a variable equal to it in a sort of normal fashion. But that's not what I'm doing here, because async task is an abstract class. But what I can do is I can implement the abstract method using a anonymous class type syntax. So I get rid of the semicolon there and open a curly parenthesis, hit return, and Eclipse has put a closing parenthesis in there for me, and I'll add the semicolon after that. And then I'll click this warning here and go to add unimplemented methods, and that will implement my method for me right here. So between these brackets, and now this is a legal declaration. And I must return null here, because if you've got a return type of void like this, you have to return null. You're not allowed to not have a return statement, so that must be there. And now I'm going to take my store points code and put it in there. And now points, you can't refer to a local variable from within a method of an anonymous class unless it's declared final. So that's what I'll do. My points here, which are actually declared here, I'll make this variable final, and that just means that I can't reassign points to point them at something else. I can't reassign this local variable, but I don't want to anyway, so that's fine. And the points themselves in the list that this is receiving can of course change, so this won't affect anything. And now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to right click here and go to source, override implement methods, and I'm going to override this on post execute method, and this runs after your task has finished executing. So I'm going to just use that as a logical place to dismiss the dialog. So on post execute will run when this code has finished running, and I also have to make the alert dialog final if I want to refer to that within this method of my anonymous kind of inner class. So I think that looks pretty good. Now because db.storePoints, it might take a while to return, and for that reason it's great to put it in a asynchronous task, even if you don't want to show a dialog to indicate what's happening. But it's also possible that it might return very quickly, and usually it probably will. So just so that we can definitely see something happening, I'm going to put thread.sleep in here for 1 second. And I'm also I'm running this code at the moment on my I'll just handle the exception here. I'm running it on my mobile phone just because my laptop keeps overheating with the strain of running an emulator, so I thought I'd run it on my phone instead. And I've got debug turned on my phone, and my project is set to debuggable in the application setting of the manifest.xml, as I described in a previous tutorial. So I can debug it on my phone quite happily if I want to. Now I'm using this screencast, Android screencast thing here that I showed you before, and I'm now going to run my actually let's just put a log.d in here, and I'll say here I'll use my usual debug tag, because just to prove that this is working, and say let's say points saved, and I want to show you that you can happily get debug output from your phone as long as debugging is switched on the phone and in your project. And now finally let's run this. So actually it's not actually finished yet, because I've defined the task that we want to run, but now I actually have to run it by saying task.execute like this, and this isn't going to take any parameters because I specified void for all these parameter types here. So this method now, the whole method, where are we? This whole thing is going to return basically immediately, and this code will meanwhile carry on executing after this method has returned. It'll execute in its own thread, which is what I want. So finally now, let's just run this, and let me go to my phone in the real world here and unlock it, and it's installing, and you can see on the this is the screencast that's running my application from last time I ran it, but in just a second we should see it. And still installing. Let's go to DDMS. Okay, so and I'm going to filter the debug. Yeah, the debug output's filtered on my debug my debug tag JWP. I'm just going to clear the logcat log there and look at my phone. Whoops. So unlock the screen again. So here's my phone, and I'm just going to click OK to say yes, I want to set my pass points, and I'll click 4 of them, and we can see the debug output coming out here in the logcat, even though I'm running this on my phone, which is very nice. And then after I click the 4th one, it says storing pass points, as you can see, and it saves them in the database, and you can see points saved coming out here. Let's just do that once more because it's such fun. There we go, storing pass points saved. Okay, so that looks good to me, and that's it for this tutorial. So just a very basic asynchronous task, and we didn't cover these parameters, but if you want to run something in the background, and most often you just want to run something without really having a lot of different data being involved, you just want to tell it to run, and this is the quickest and easiest way to do it. So that's it for this tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.